Allan Browne joins me in the studio now. Thanks, Allan, for coming in today.
Thanks, mate. It's nice to be here.
I'm really glad that you had the time to come in, and especially around this time, there's a lot happening in jazz, and there's a lot happening at Stonnington as well.
Well, Stonnington, it certainly keeps me running around. It's
You are the patron. What does that mean?
I'm still not sure.
Still not sure.
I rang Graham Bell. He's the patron of all sorts of things, and he said you just have to turn up, Alan.
Okay, well...
And be part of it, and come along and talk. It's great. I enjoy it.
Get to see a lot of great music.
Yeah.
Well, we just did hear a sneak peek, a track off your forthcoming record, Shreveport Stomp. When will we be lucky enough to be hearing that?
Well, you'll have to be able to buy it by the 13th of June because we're launching it that night on Bennett's. It's a Monday night while Sam's here at the end of the International Festival. So it'll be available then on Jazz Head.
Okay, on the... Sorry, when did you say? The 13th?
Of June.
Of June.
Yeah.
Cool.
Monday.
At Bennett's Lane. So keep an eye out for that one. Now, you, aside from being the patron of the Stonnington Jazz Festival, you are performing. You're going to be performing a work, I suppose, or a set of works under the title Verses from the Past. Now, you have been on the jazz scene in Melbourne and I guess on the world stage as well for many, many years, but you've always struck me as somebody that is keen to push forward. You're always collaborating with new artists, and each of your releases sounds quite different, especially in the last 10, 20 years. So is there any reason in particular that you've decided now to start reflecting on your past?
Well, Kim, it's not so much well, it is reflection, but it's a process of moving forward. I was thinking I've been using poetry to push us into areas we're not normally going for the last 3 albums. And this one is the same, but it's stuff written by myself about people I've worked with who aren't with us anymore. I've been really lucky to work with some wonderful people. And they have all influenced me profoundly. So I've written a short piece, and then the idea was that I'd read this piece and the band would play compositions written by us collectively. Well, by each member has 1 or 2 compositions. And it's such a fantastic band, I mean, with Eugene Ball and Jeff Hughes, Mark Hannaford, Nick Haywood, Phil Noy. They've come up with some fantastic things, and one of the sort of more traditional ones I've written. So the projects we've been working on at Bennett's Lane and at rehearsal for 8 months or something. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's come together nicely. It's
such a vast body of work and experience to draw from. I mean, it must be difficult for you and those around you to try to, what is your past?
Yeah. Well, on this record, it's just specific people. If you take, for instance, the suite that Mark Hannaford wrote called Swing Street Suite, which is 3 pieces influenced by 3 songs that have been incredibly important to me over the years, from the 30s, late 30s, when Billie Holiday and Teddy Wilson made all those fantastic recordings, with Lester Young and everyone, but mainly with the 2 of them, and there's so much entrenched in me. I've probably heard more of them than anything else in my life. And when I hear Teddy Wilson playing the first 4 bars, the intro, I know that it's going to be Did I Remember, or Love Me or Leave Me, or you know what I mean, whatever it is. So, Mark's come up with a beautiful arrangement of that, and Eugene's come up with a beautiful couple of arrangements, one for Wild Bill Davison, and Jeff Hughes has written one for Emily Remler, who's the legendary guitarist who came here a couple of times and I worked with back in the late 80s, and she unfortunately died of an overdose in Sydney on the last tour she was here, which was horrendous at about 29. But she influenced me a great deal too. And so it's sort of a tribute to all these people that I've had a chance to meet and play with.
Yeah, so just to reiterate that point, these are people that you've performed with, and there's an incredible list of...
Yeah. Well, it's more luck, I think, though, Kim. I mean, I was around, and there was a time in the 70s when jazz rock was big. So a lot of the great artists didn't have so much work, so they'd come here and play with the local rhythm section. It's probably why. I don't know, but whatever it is, I don't care. I had a good time. You know?
So most of these collaborations took place in Australia when they were touring, or did you spend some time?
Yeah. No, it was all here.
Yeah. Right.
And it was just a great string of them, you know.
Well, you're very well known as one of the founding members of the Red Onion Jazz Band, and you've obviously held on to your love of trad music, trad jazz, but you've also, as I mentioned earlier, moved into different areas with your music. And there's a great interview with you in around about 1967 where you talk about performing in Poland and seeing free jazz and avant-garde performances there. And you say that you didn't really understand it, but you're clearly in awe of what they've done. Can you talk a bit about that transition from having a very clear idea of what you thought jazz was towards doing something a bit more experimental?
Yeah, look, absolutely. It ruined a lot of my obsession with the old music. So overnight, really, because it was Keith Jarrett and Jack DeJohnette and Charles Lloyd, Cecil McBee, Roland Kirk. They were all on this festival. We were only there because we were the only Australians they could get, I'm quite sure, but to make it international. But it was great for us. And but it did turn us round, and it really did change my view. And as soon as I came home, I started listening to Ornette Coleman, and I was listening to Ornette around about the time when he was making the records. You know, it wasn't like years later. You know, we were trying to play Ramblin' and all this, but we weren't very good at it, and we didn't understand anything. But I started working at it because it was very important to me that I tried to drag myself into the 20th century, you know what I mean, or the late 20th century.
And it's something that you still seem to be exploring, that relationship between the different periods of jazz. And your forthcoming record is, I think, the second trio record with Sam Manning and Mark Hannaford, the previous one being Homage. And that one featured a lot of standards, jazz standards, some trad standards. Something that struck me was your decision to record an album like that as a trio. When you hear those familiar chords from songs like Black and Tan Fantasy or King Porter Stomp or In My Solitude, you have the brass in your head. So why a stripped back version of those songs?
Well, my attitude to playing freer has always been to learn something completely and then take it apart. And so, or try and learn it. I mean, that sounds arrogant, to learn something. You can't learn what Thelonious Monk was thinking or anything, but we play light blue in our way. We don't discuss it. We don't make any arrangement. In fact, Mark just played it that night on the thing. We had never played it before, for instance, that particular song. Sam knew it. I mean, we all three of us know a lot of material, but something like Shreveport Stomp, which is the Jelly Roll Morton classic from the 20s, that was a bit more conscious because Mark had to work out the two-handed piano bits, which he does superbly. And then we moved it into our own area, you know, and played it the way we would play it now in 2011, without any holds barred. I mean, that to me is the most beautiful thing, to go out to Bennett's Lane without any preconceived ideas. Sit down with two other guys who you know backwards, or the quintet or the septet from Sunday at Stonnington, and play, just play music and have a dialogue with all of them at the same time.
Is that, you've been doing the Monday night residencies at Bennett's Lane for a very long time, and each time I check, it seems to be a different ensemble that you're performing with, and year to year that'll change. Is it a time for you to sit down and just, you know, open a dialogue with these friends? Is that what you imagine these Monday nights to be for you?
Yeah, the bottom line is that when our hero, well, my hero, is Miles Davis, say, in the 60s, with Herbie and Ron Carter and Tony Williams and Wayne Shorter. And to me, that is the acme of jazz, improvised. So I think, how can I do that? I can't possibly do that. I'm not in the right place. I'm not in the right time. But I can do my best, because those guys played together every night for years, not just a month, for years. And they probably didn't have time to play with anyone else. They knew each other absolutely backwards. They were also the greatest players in the world, as Miles Davis always had the greatest players in the world in his band. So, you know, you can just put them up there on a big shelf. But the thing about Bennett's Lane is it gives me a chance to work with Mark and Sam regularly every week and work out a dialogue with these guys that I love. And it's exactly the same with the septet from Sunday at Stonnington. We have a dialogue. We may not be playing a whole lot of very free music, because quite a bit of it's intricately written in this case, but we do have this dialogue going on all the time. And to me, that's what jazz is about. If there's not a dialogue, it's not jazz. That's what made me love the early New Orleans bands. They all talk to each other all the time in this ongoing ensemble. And so does Miles Davis in the 60s, and so does Jack DeJohnette, Keith Jarrett and Gary Peacock in that trio, or Brad Maldau, or anyone. You know what I mean? They're having a dialogue all the time. They're my heroes.
It's approaching 15 minutes to 5 p.m. You are tuned to 3RRR. Kim Jirik filling in on The Village, and my guest is Allan Browne, here talking about your music, and also here to talk about the Stonnington Jazz Festival. Now, as we keep saying, you are the patron. What are you hanging out for? Of all these shows that you have to go to, what are you...
Well, I don't have to go to all of them. I've got a few other gigs, you know. But I'm really interested in Andrew Robson's Talus project. And I think that the Bop Stretch are great guys and really good players. They play regularly, I think, at Uptown, so they'll be playing for the first time on the festival. And I always love Vince's playing, Vince Jones. I was with him for a couple of years, and I have a huge respect for Vince as a singer and songwriter and band leader. What else? The Stonnington Youth Band are playing, and I play with them. They're all kids in the area from schools, wonderful kids.
Can I ask you a question about that? You teach as well. Do you get a particular kind of joy out of seeing young jazz musicians or performing with young jazz musicians, as opposed to playing with very established people who have already found their voice? And how does that feel? Well,
it's fantastic. I've just been a week in Adelaide at the jazz course there as artist in residence, so I think I've played with 100 kids over there in different ensembles over the week, and it was really terrific. Here, I'm working with people who haven't performed in public a lot. There's a particular guy in Melbourne called John Smethers, he just came to me and said, could I play with you every week? He plays alto, and he's from Queensland, and we've been working our dialogue up at my place for a year. But we're now playing together as a quartet with Scott Tinkler on the trumpet, you know, and that's a beautiful band too, you know. So there's all sorts of things happening all the time.
Yeah, and heaps happening at Stonnington. It's running until the 29th of May. That's next weekend, isn't it? So
yeah, and it's all Australian. That's the
all
fantastic
Australian,
thing.
yeah, 100% Australian artists. Are there are a lot of familiar artists from the Melbourne scene. What about, are there many people coming from outside?
Well, Stu Hunter's band's coming, and I haven't got a list here, but there's a lot, some great people.
Absolutely.
I'll get killed.
Andrew Robson as a patron. Stonningtonjazz.com.au is where you can pick up all the info. Now, we're going to finish up with a track from the Drunken Boat, and this is the quintet that you'll be performing with tomorrow. Is that correct?
With Mark Hannaford added.
With Mark Hannaford added.
Yeah.
And you'll also be performing as a trio.
No, it's just
the quintet?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We call it a septet. It's changed along the way.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Now, the Drunken Boat was influenced by the verses of Arthur Rimbaud, and you mentioned earlier that you are going, before this performance tomorrow, you are going to read a poem. What have you found in poetry and in literature that then translates into
jazz?
Improvisation, into jazz?
Yeah, improvised music. Well, the thing is that where else you can take inspiration from a painting, you can play a painting, but really I find poetry a really good way of sending me in a different direction and sending my colleagues in a different direction. If they think about something, they write a piece, they improvise on it, and it must be a bit different than just getting together and writing a series of songs.
So even on an unconscious level, if you've read a poem or read part of a novel, you feel like it flows into what you then perform. Do you, or are they supposed to repeat it in their head over and over again?
No. It's just more a way of thinking thinking differently. Because really, in jazz, the important thing is to try and do your own thing. You're never going to play. I'm never going to play like Tony Williams. So I just try and be me. For instance. Yeah.
Allan Browne, it's been a great pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kim.